When I first started thinking about what to preach about living holy lives, the phrase peculiar people came into my head, and so I just kept thinking about that. I was like, I know it's in the Bible, where does it come from? Do we have any King James people here who mainly do their Bible reading in the King James? Okay, yeah, not me. I don't usually do it, so I don't know where it came from, but it's a King James translation of something that Peter says in his first letter. So that's my hint. If you want to open to 1 Peter, that's where we're going to go this morning. If you want to be there, yeah, thank you. So he uses this phrase to communicate something particular and something special about the people of God. And we're going to read it, but I think the question to start with is, how do we be peculiar in Nanaimo? Have you seen the bumper stickers? Yes, they're my favorite. They say, keep Nanaimo weird, and every time I see them I kind of laugh and I think, oh yeah, this is hilarious. This is very Nanaimo. Or sometimes I see somebody kind of doing something funny. You know, they're out paddleboarding in a costume, and I kind of laugh. I'm like, yep, this is very Nanaimo. This is how it is. I came here initially with a missionary mindset to go, okay, I want to learn about the culture. I want to see what's going on and see what God is doing. And I have to be really honest, I just loved it. And it hasn't worn off. It's been enough years now that I'm pretty confident it's not going to. I do really enjoy the culture that's here. And I know we have some Saskatchewan people in the crowd, and so I'll be careful, not just my in-laws, but I'll be careful about saying it's the best place, because I know I'll get fought on that. But I do think it's a pretty good place. So I think we can probably agree on that. But besides the obvious, the really obvious extravagant beauty of creation that we have here, there are some things in the culture that I think reflect God's heart. And one of them is the care that people have for the created world and the ways that they want to steward that well. And there's also a deep value for justice and to care for people who are marginalized. These are good things. And I love when I'm talking to people and I can say to them, yes, those are good things, and God cares about these things too. It's a much better way than being like, no, your values are all wrong. Everything that's in you is wrong. You don't understand anything. When we can affirm to people, actually you care about these things because the image of God is in you. It's a way in where they can say, yeah, I can imagine a good God. And so these are things in the culture that are already good, but I think that we have a particular challenge to be peculiar people in Nanaimo. So I'm going to read a little bit of what Peter says. I'm going to switch from my version to the King James Version just for that phrase. But I'm going to start in chapter 2, and I'm going to read from verses 9 to 12. 1 Peter. So 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. I'm going to read a few more verses out of chapter 4. I'm going to read verses 7 to 10. The end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. I'm going to say, I actually just considered standing up and reading the whole letter. I thought, like, this actually speaks directly to us in so many ways. But these verses are representative of some of the different things that Peter says. He, in this book, he kind of casts a vision of who we are to be as the church, of what it can look like when we are being the people of God. And one of the things that comes up, I mean, it comes up all over the New Testament, but it's a people together. So in that time, there were Jews and Gentiles that were very distinct. They were people groups that didn't mix, basically. And he's saying, now you are one. Now, we don't have those kind of distinctives, but we are also called to be one. And one of the things that I see, that I love, is everybody's kind of unique weirdness, but it comes out of a deep-seated individualism. And so we are called to step out of our individualism and our insistence on our own way and our own things to serve and love and prefer one another. It's a beautiful thing when that happens, and I think that would be quite peculiar here in this city. Another thing I saw that surprised me is that the body of Christ here in Nanaimo is actually quite unified. We are in this city, let alone all over the world, but in this city, we're part of a big body of believers that extends far out beyond just Compass Church. A few weeks ago, I was at a prayer event that it's just different people throughout the city. And I prayed with a woman who came from an Anglican church who was there because her neighbor had invited her, and she had lost her husband a couple of years ago, and she was just feeling so bereft, and she wanted some comfort that night. And so we prayed with her. I also got to pray with a Filipino woman who was there to pray. She's wrestling with her teenage daughter and trying to figure out, as they make the move to this culture, how does she hold on to her daughter and help her grow up in a good way? I got to pray with a nurse from the hospital who said that she had committed to pray for somebody who's a Catholic believer who had just moved into a key position. And so I kind of came home going, okay, there's somebody in this position at the hospital. I'm going to pray for him too. We prayed with somebody who's about to go and be a student at VIU, and I got to pray with somebody who's a friend who I kind of met through YWAM, who has now moved across the world. And I by no means prayed with everybody. I prayed with kind of a small group, but I just thought, wow, there are so many people in this city. I know we're a small minority as Christians in Nanaimo. We know that. But there are people spread throughout this city doing some really cool things and ministering in some really interesting ways. And it's a good reminder to say, okay, I actually am unified with all of these people, and I want to pray for them and support them and help them in whatever way I can. The same as these people that Peter was writing to. We're called to hospitality, to love each other. We're called to use our gifts to serve each other. So that's one peculiar thing. We are a people together. The second, that he says it a few different ways. He says, look guys, you might suffer for doing something good, but don't confuse that with the consequences for doing something bad. I don't think we're in danger generally of being beaten. He talks about this. He's like, if you steal something and you get beaten, like, don't complain. And I thought, okay. I heard, rewind. He talks about some of the things that we do. He talks about malice and slander and envy. He says, put those things away. So, good. Don't lie. Don't gossip. Don't talk bad about people. Stop doing it. He said, act honorably so that God will be glorified. This is still true. I think our hang-up sometimes in Western Christianity is we get these things confused with being a Christian. And so just kind of being a good person and doing the right thing and believing the right thing, that's not really what Christianity is. That's self-righteous moralism. And nobody likes those people. I think it's a trap, though. I think it's really easy when we're in a culture that doesn't follow God's ways to think that the way to follow God is to be godly and to be right and stand for the right things. And I thought, okay, sometimes when people react to our self-righteousness, we think it's persecution. And I heard one of the best messages, one of the most memorable messages I've heard in the last 10 years. It was delivered with humor. He had media. He was brilliant. But his basic message was, if you're being a jerk in the way that you're sharing your faith, you're not being persecuted. You're just experiencing the consequences of your actions. I think that's true. I think the way that we fall into consequences in our culture can be from that. And so I think sometimes, I'm sure none of you, actually, I'm sure none of you are guilty of this, but that we sometimes think we're presenting our faith, but we're actually being kind of a little bit haughty or a little bit proud or a little bit. And then when people respond the wrong way, we go, oh, we're being persecuted, or they're rejecting God. And it's like, well, nope, we're just experiencing the consequences of our actions. So his point was, my summary, my takeaway was, don't be a jerk. But he said it so beautifully. He was much more gentle than I am today. So, people together, don't be a jerk. The third thing he talks about over and over again is being sojourners and exiles. And this is really important for me, because I have to remember this isn't my home. Before we came here, we lived in central Alberta, and I was very aware all the time, like, this is not my place. These people are not my people. I don't feel like I fit here. And then we moved to Rwanda, and there was a certain amount there where I felt like I fit, but like even visibly, language-wise, everything, it was like, no, I don't belong here. It was easy to remember that I was an expat in that country. When we came here, I thought, oh yeah, these are my people. And so sometimes I need the reminder that no matter how comfortable I am, and no matter how much I see God at work, my true belonging, your true belonging, is as a citizen of heaven. And so this is not my home. The values of this culture are not my culture. The ways of being, even though sometimes they're similar, and that's okay, that's good, because God has done good things in this culture. It's not the same. Did you know that the early Christians were actually called atheists? I've been laughing about this for a while, but so it means against the gods. And the early Christians, they only worshipped one God. They didn't worship all the gods. And they believed that the peace where they lived was maintained through proper worship of the gods. So if you had worshipped the gods properly, they wouldn't do bad things to you, so bad things wouldn't happen. And they didn't worship the gods, and so they criticized them as atheists. And I thought, yeah, they would never call us atheists, But we're in kind of a similar position here, where people would look at us and go, oh, like, you're not holding up the things that we're holding up, and you're not, I mean, we, for example, we honor creation. God made it, and he did a good job. It's great. I will spend time in the trees, I will spend time in the ocean, I will be happy. But I value them as a fellow created thing. They are also created by God. And because I honor God, I want to honor his creation. The creation is not an end in itself. And so that would be, just a way of being different. And I think in a similar way, sometimes people are threatened by that. And I think we can respond with gentleness. We don't have to be defending me. Atheists, similar. We're viewed as different. Maybe I'll just, we're viewed as a different kind of people. I think that there are a couple of ways in particular, as people of God who live in Nanaimo in 2025, are called to be peculiar to the culture. And I think this is maybe North America-wide too, not just particular to Nanaimo. One is in regards to capitalism and commercialism. Guys, there is so much stuff. It's unprecedented how much access we have to things that people throughout history, for thousands and thousands of years, have not had the access to stuff. I always think about clothes. There's a couple times in the Bible where they get given gifts of clothes. And I'm like, so what? Like, you bought that at Walmart for $6? Like, good job. But no, like, they had to harvest the wool or the cotton, and then they had to weave it and make it into a yarn, and then they had to make that yarn into cloth, and then they had to cut it and dye it and fit it. Like, it is a valuable thing. That's just clothing, let alone all of the plastic things. And I think our culture also sends the message that we need to have the best thing of everything, or also the cheapest thing. We don't need every convenience. We don't need the best of everything. And I think that that's one way. We got into a conversation with my parents a few years ago. When we were living in Rwanda, we decided we wanted a blender. We wanted a really good blender because we were gonna have smoothies. And I had to get them to order it. So they kind of looked at me and they were like, wow, like, this missionary business is a racket. Like, this blender, you guys must be making a lot of money. And I looked at them and I was like, we don't have a car, we don't have a house. This is gonna be our only appliance. We don't have any other appliances. We don't have running water, all the things, but we're prioritizing this blender. And I thought, okay, not that we can't have nice stuff, not that we can't have good things, but I think to be thoughtful about what's the message that we're buying into. Do we need this best thing? Do we, whatever. I love a good deal. I love steals on things. I love getting a bargain. I'll be the first one to be like, yeah, I got it thrifted. I got it for $2, But sometimes cheap stuff has a price. We are awash in cheap stuff. And I think it behooves us to think about who paid the price for this cheap stuff. I always look at clothing and I think somebody made that. Somebody grew the cotton or the flax that was made into linen, or nobody grew polyester, I don't know where, but somebody was responsible for the creation of that fabric. And then somebody sewed it, or somebody ran the machine that sewed it. And all of these people are not getting recompensed for their time in a way that will allow them to live. And just because I don't see them, just because they're across the world somewhere, it makes it easy for me to ignore. And I think as Christians, we need to think about the cost in ways more than just like, what is the dollars coming out of my pocket to cost these things to produce? It's a soapbox of mine. I don't know these people, but they're made in God's image, and they have value, and I want the things that I am consuming to be made with integrity, in as much as I can ensure it, in as much as I can do it. Clothes are one thing, but there's also all the stuff you guys can think of, like whatever is the thing, right? Food, plastic stuff, all the things. I think, I don't want to like slam on Amazon because I love them, but man, it's so easy to get stuff delivered to my door, and so I don't think about it all the time. So to just like, for us to take a minute and step back and think about our rate of, and our value for capitalism and for commercialism that can be different from the culture around us. I think the second way that we can be peculiar is it's related. It's in regard to our work and our rest and our busyness. I think less in Nanaimo than in North America, but still here, we kind of glorify busyness and being busy, and I don't think that that was God's plan for us. Plus, technology can just take our time. Now, we sometimes, often, we have to work hard to survive. We have to work hard to create food, to create money that can buy the things, to do the things. I'm not talking about don't work. I think two things. As people of God, we can affirm, work, good. Rest, good. I always go back to the first chapter of Genesis. I'm going, this is the first message that God wanted to give to a group of people who were coming out of slavery. They were in a position, much as we are today, where they just work and work and work and work, and the value of their time and the value of their being was not reflected in their work. And there are a couple of ways that the creation story in Genesis is different than some of the other creation stories that were floating around at the time. And one of the ways is that generally what people believed back then was that the gods made people because they didn't want to work. They didn't want to do work to get food, so they made people so the people could work. They basically be the god slaves, and then they would bring them food so that they could exist. And work was not dignified and work was not honored. And so one of the things that happens in Genesis is God says, your work is good. And then the second thing is he says, and you should rest. So those are two messages that we can carry into this culture. Both the goodness and value of our works, and the goodness and value of our rest. I don't know about you guys, but one of the phrases I've heard over and over and over and over and over and over is that time equals money. You guys familiar with this? Have you ever spent some time thinking about that? I just think that is obscene. I think it's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, like I understand the concept of making an hourly wage. I don't most of the time, but it makes sense to me. I have. I'm like, yes, but my time doesn't equal money. I can't put a value on like holding a baby. What's the value of half an hour holding a sleepy newborn, guys? Poof. What about doing a good hike and succeeding and getting to the top and then seeing a good view? It's not a value. I mean, if you were doing Everest, I know there's like a money value on how much you pay to do it. I was thinking about a good night's sleep. for me at the moment. I was like, poof, I can't value that. I can't value connecting with a good friend and having that moment where you really make the connection. Or when you get to tell somebody about Jesus or something new about God and they get it. When you have that conversation or that experience and somebody understands, I'm like, I can't put a dollar value on that. That's gonna echo into eternity. Who cares? I like to eat and be clothed and pay for things as much as that I put gas in my car. But my time doesn't equal money. They are not the same. The time, you can never get it back. You can never get it back. I just want to leave you with those things this week, to spend some time thinking about how are we peculiar? What are the ways we, and I mean we, right? Because that was the first part, is together are called to be peculiar here in Nanaimo. As I said earlier, our lives are built on really different value systems than the ones that we are inundated with all the time, right? Like just commercials and billboards and conversations and TV shows and books. We are bathed in the values of our culture. And so we need consistent reminders that our lives are meant to be different. We need consistent conversations that help us remember that our values are actually built on something different. And so one of my prayers going out for this is also that we can have those conversations and that we can be those reminders for one another as we go through our lives and days. I'm gonna pray and I'm gonna close. I see Mike peeking through the back, that's why I was laughing, sorry. Father, I thank you for this particular group of peculiar people who have shown up here today at Compass Church. I thank you that each of them is unique in their own way. Each of them is made in your image in a way that no one else on earth or throughout history has ever been or will be. And I thank you that together, that we are the body of Christ. I thank you that whatever things we don't have in common, that we have this one most very important thing that holds us together and undergirds our lives. Lord, I pray that we would live these lives in such a way that people would recognize something is different, that people would ask about the reason for our hope, that people would ask about the reason for our quirkiness or our choices, the things that might be different about us, that people would see the ways that we act honorably and glorify you. Father, we ask all these things for your honor and for your glory and in your mighty name. Amen.